täglich von Männern und lache dazu. Ob steht die ganze Bande, verliebt von meinem Tor und ich zur Mandoline voll Sehnsucht im Chor. Magnola, du Frau meiner Nächte, wie gern ich ein Opfer dir brächte.
I'm David Garland. Welcome to Evening Music. Welcome, listeners, and welcome very special guest, Marta Eggerth. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you could join me. Marta Eggerth has an extraordinary career, and she has starred in operettas on stages in Vienna, Paris, and New York, and many other places as well as on film in Europe and Hollywood. She's been singing for over 80 years in front of appreciative audiences, gathering applause wherever she performs, and moving people with the emotion of her performances as well as the lyricism of her voice. So thank you for joining me tonight.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
It's a very special privilege to be able to speak with you and share some of your recordings. Recently, a 2-CD set has been issued that documents some of your recordings from about 1932 to 2002.
Yes.
You're still singing.
Yes.
And still sounding great, as listeners will hear. Here's a recording made in 1936 by my guest, Marta Eggerth. performance that, to my ear, just seems to have everything you would want in a performance of the Blue Danube. There's a lightness, a sense of joy, and a sense of effortless accuracy as well. And the person who just sang that is sitting across from me tonight, Marta Eggerth, a recording made in 1936. She is, if I may tell our radio audience, 94 years old and joining me here tonight on Evening Music to share some of her recordings. Do you enjoy listening to yourself in those recordings?
Yes, I do. But I will tell you the differences between recording today and recording in those days. Today they record and they take pieces extra recording.
Right.
But there it had to be all in one.
Yes, you and
In
the
one
orchestra
recording.
all at once, right?
Everything at once. There was one microphone hanging down for orchestra, for the singer, and it better be good.
Well, it was. So you did just fine. Marta Eggerth is here with me. And your professional singing career began when you were particularly young.
Yes, 11-year-old I was. And it came all by chance. It was never planned or anything.
Well, your mother was a singer,
Well,
right?
my mother had the most beautiful voice in the world, a dramatic coloratura.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, I sang I was already 3-year-old, and I sang her repertory. Un bel dì vedremo, and Tosca and everything, because that was her repertoire. But then when I started to sing, then she gave up everything and devoted her whole life to me. But she was not a theater mother. No. No.
And this was not so much because she was ambitious for you, but she heard that you had the voice. Is that
Well,
so?
I also made very young a very quick career in Budapest, in Hungary. Mm-hmm. And so she was not anymore interested in her life. She gave me her entire time and life, yes. Because my parents were divorced, and so I was everything she had.
Yes. And so you began in starring roles at a young age, is that correct?
Yes, I started in the most fantastic theater in Budapest, the Magyar Színház, that is the Hungarian theater, and there was all grown-ups. It was the first so-called musical, all dramatic actors, and they needed a little girl who sings, and they found me, and so they engaged me immediately, and I got a very big success. And I was very famous at the time in Budapest, and then Emmerich Kálmán heard me, the famous Hungarian composer, and he took me to Vienna to be the understudy for Adele Kern. She was a very famous opera singer in Vienna, and because Emmerich Kálmán wrote this operetta for her, Adele Kern, and they needed an understudy in case she has to sing in the opera. But God wanted it this way that she canceled the 9th performance. I only saw 9 performances of her, and this was in German language, which was not very easy for me. And I had to jump in because she canceled it. She had some misunderstanding with the director or something.
I see.
And so I jumped in the role, and I had a very, very big success. And from then on, only I sang the operetta. Mm-hmm. And then Emmerich Kálmán also took me to the German, to Hamburg, where I also sang. I was 18-year-old, Die Fledermaus, the Adele.
Wow.
And they saw me in some film director in Germany, and they took me then to film, and then I made almost 40 films in 3 different languages.
Wow.
In German, in French, and in English. And here I am.
And sometimes, well, we can talk more about the films later. I had a question about that, but we'll speak of it later. But let's hear a little more music. This will present listeners with, sort of represent the range of your work, from Puccini and the opera La Boheme, Musetta's Waltz, to a kind of almost a jazzy pop song that is in German, but with a little refrain in English saying, I love you.
It's a more modern sound.
Yes. So 2 recordings by my guest, Marta Eggerth. The first made in 1937, 70 years ago, and the other made 75 years ago in 1932 here on WNYC.
zärtlich fragen, my darling, liebst du mich? Mein Fräulein, ich erwähne es nur so nebenbei. Ich wüsst ja so viel Schönes, was ich könnte. Ich könnte sie jetzt zärtlich küssen und tu's nicht.
Von Liebe sprechen findet man banal. Man sucht dieselben Worte tausendmal. Man möchte etwas sprechen, was kein anderer spricht. Und wenn es so weit ist, dann tut man nicht. Ich könnte jetzt zu Ihnen sagen, I love you. Ich lieb dich. Ich könnte Sie my darling, liebst du mich? Meine Liebe, ich erwähne es nur so nebenbei. Ich wüsste ja so viel Schönes, was ich könnte.
My guest, Marta Eggerth, is laughing to hear herself sing those high notes at the end of the song.
It's so charmingly old-fashioned.
It is.
And I'm an old girl, but I'm not old-fashioned. I like everything new, modern, and go ahead. Into the future. Can you imagine? What is that? Am I crazy? I am an old bag, and I always think of the future. Isn't that funny?
Well, I'm sure that's what keeps you young in part.
Yeah.
That and
maybe
some luck with the old body and and mind and the voice. But yes, that was my guest, Marta Eggerth, singing along with Max Mensing in a 1932 film soundtrack from a movie called Das Blaue von Himmel. And before that, Puccini's Musetta's Waltz from La Boheme, recorded in 1937. We're listening to selections featuring the voice of my guest, Marta Eggerth, that come from a double CD set on Patria Records. And the first CD covers the years 1932 to 37, and the second CD brings us up to 2002, and we'll be listening to some of those recordings next. And Marta, you mentioned that when you were young, you were considered extraordinary, that she should sing so well and yet be so young. And,
yes.
And now people are sort of saying the opposite.
And now they say, because I started, as a wunderkind, and she's so young. And now I'm still singing. They say, oh, and she's still singing. Wonderful. I must tell you a funny story.
Please.
Not long ago, I was at the doctor's office waiting, and there was another lady, and she was an old lady, real old lady, and Hungarian also. Oh. And she said, oh, do you remember Marta Eggerth? I said, yes. Oh, wasn't she wonderful? Wasn't
really?
She wonderful? I said, yes. And she asked me, do you know if she is still alive? I said, yes, she's standing right in front of you. I thought she dies.
That must have been a real surprise. Boy, kind of dangerous to tell someone that maybe in that situation. And you got your start in Budapest, as you told us, and then you went to Vienna. Is that where you had your greatest success?
Well,
your success lasted a long time.
Well, so. As a grown-up first, because I got the first grown-up role in Vienna, in Das Falsche von Montmartre. And yes, that was a very, very big success. And from then on, it went to films and so on and so forth. And
Vienna, a very important cultural place at that time, and important for many reasons. Freud was there when you were there, right? And
yes. But I didn't think much of it at the time. I didn't know what it will be. Freud today is such a big thing. I knew he's some kind of a doctor for cuckoo people, but more I didn't know, because I was also too young, and I will be very frank with you, I wasn't interested in anything except my singing. And they wanted to have me for the Vienna Staatsoper, Vienna State Opera. I should only study all Mozart roles, and I would get a big salary for 5 years. And I said, no, I was 18 in 5 years. My goodness, I will be already 23. That seemed to me at the time like very old,
Yes.
So I said no, and because I said no, it took me all around the world.
Mm. And you didn't go so much into opera, but rather operetta. And I thought it might be interesting to hear what you have to say about the difference between those two music forms.
The difference between opera and operetta is really not very much, because operetta needs trained singers for opera, because you have to be trained for opera to really sing good operetta. Mm-hmm. And in Europe, for example, in every opera house, they play operetta. like La Belle Hélène and of course the Fledermaus and the Merry Widow, now even in the Metropolitan Opera, finally. But in Europe they always play operetta also in opera houses. Today is Zauberflöte and tomorrow is Wagner and after tomorrow is Donizetti something and then it's Lehar or Kalman or other. There are many other Viennese wonderful composers, of course.
Generally, in the operetta stories are lighter than opera stories can be. We have plenty of tragic operas, but I don't think there are any tragic operettas. Is that correct?
No, well, The Land of Smiles has not a tragic end, but a sad ending.
Okay.
Because the lovers cannot get together. She goes back to Europe and he stays in China, you know. This is the story of The Land of Smiles. But, yes, you know, my husband, Jan Kiepura, he used to say, opera and operetta has one difference. In opera, everybody dies except the conductor stays alive. And in operetta, everybody makes love. And so he loved operetta very much. It was the first time we sang together in the Merry Widow. And because he was only opera, you know. And yes, opera is wonderful. I love it very much. But operetta is more easy on the heart, you know.
My guest is Marta Eggerth, the great soprano who has been recording for over 80 years, or at least performing for over 80 years. She is 94 and joining me here to share some of her recordings on WNYC. I'm David Garland, and you're listening to 93.9 WNYC and WNYC.org. WNYC is supported by the Brooklyn Philharmonic, presenting with music director Michael Christie, Anthony and the Johnsons on Friday, March 9th at 8 at Brooklyn Academy of Music. Tickets available at brooklynphilharmonic.org. We've heard some recordings that my guest Marta Eggerth made in the 1930s, but she still sings and still records, and some recordings were made in 2002, and we're going to hear a couple of those right now. This first that I've chosen is in Hungarian, and it's probably fun for you to be able to sing in that language, Marta. And we're going to hear that and follow it with a piece by Kreisler, a piece called The Old Refrain. So here is music recorded in 2002 by my guest, Marta Eggerth.
Çok yaşa biter.